This is With the First Pick, the CBS Sports NFL Draft Podcast. Rick, this is episode 67. I'm Ryan Wilson. That, of course, is Rick Spielman. Today, With the First Pick Summer Scouting School is looking at the offensive line class. Back in April, 5 offensive linemen went in the first round, and I feel like this group, at least at the top, may be more day one NFL ready, which is saying something.
Yeah.
What?
I'm sorry. I cut you off in your 20-minute dissertation on
I know.
what we're doing today.
What do you think about that statement?
I'm going to agree with you. The guys that I've seen, because of all the hard work and effort that you put into this summer school scouting, and while most people are on vacation, Debo, our boss, has really put the hammer down on us and spending hours and hours doing tape to get prepared for this 2024 NFL draft.
Yeah, just a peek behind the curtain before we went on. Pete. I'm sorry that I call you Pete. I should have to put like a nickel in the swear jar every time I call you Pete. Rick was lamenting the fact that he has to spend 6 to 8 hours studying up for each of these podcasts on the individual groups, but that's how seriously he takes it. And Debo, we need a little bell or a button or something that needs to be chimed every time Rick agrees with me. I don't think it'll get a lot of use, but we're 1 minute into this podcast, and Rick is already in agreement.
I'm alongside of my good friend, CBS Sports draft analyst Ryan Wilson.
So that day, or what? That was hideous.
That was
because my wife bought that for me.
That was I think that was a forced read that you were made to do for a promotion. But either way, no one knows that, and I appreciate it. But
that was ad-lib, by the way. I did not have that in the script.
That was ad-libbed. All right, let me continue. Rick wanted to agree with me, so you can interrupt me anytime to agree, Rick. I appreciate that. All right, so we're going to talk about these offensive line classes. We'll provide some NFL comps, and I want to see if, Rick, if you agree that at least one of these guys along the offensive line could end up being the second player taken in the draft next year. This, of course, assumes that QB1 will be Caleb Williams or Drake May, whoever your favorite quarterback is. Quickly, what do you think about that? Is there a chance that –
No, none. Gone.
Two quarterbacks at least go before the first offensive lineman
and the receiver.
Oh, that's right, Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, when you're doing scouting school, and you're actually stacking and putting things up, and I know you put a big board together, whatever the heck that is, you would see that if you paid attention to your big board, that there's your receiver that's probably going to go number 3 overall.
And then we need another button, Debo, that just says, there it is. There's the old Rick we know and love. I'm going to keep a scoreboard. 1-1, good and bad, Rick. All right. By the way, Debo informs me, Rick, that you are crushing me in the Who Has the Best Player Comps polls are running over there at CBS Sports on YouTube, excuse me. And that reminds me, head over to @NFL on CBS on the old YouTubes. Cast your vote to help a brother out if you don't mind. I can't let Rick beat me on each and every one of these polls. I think I won the first one, and after that, it's been a straight descent downhill. I'm knocking over trees, running into houses. It's not going well.
Hey, Debo, did we put the poll up for these offensive linemen yet? Or no, is that after the show? Or how's that work?
We got some results coming in. I want to get a few more results to be able to share it.
Okay.
All right. Fingers crossed. Wilson's making.
Can you call in to CBS and Debo and vote for me?
That's old school email. Rick yells down the hall. All right. By the way, Rick, in case you missed it, on the last podcast, you and I continued our summer scouting school series with the running backs and tight ends. And in the previous episodes, we hit on the wide receivers and quarterbacks. You can check out all those shows in the podcast feed. And just a reminder, our summer scouting school series will continue every week right to the start of the football season. And next week, we'll be turning to the defensive side of the ball, starting with the old edge rushers. And one last thing, and we'll get to it. If you're watching us on YouTube, do us a huge favor and take a half second to hit the old thumbs up button. It really helps promote the pod to folks who may not know about us. And it's the slowish part of the draft calendar, but things are going to pick up in a hurry. Rick and Pete and even Debo will be traveling around the country going to some of these training camps. And before you know it, college and NFL seasons will be here. Anyway, to help us continue to grow and keep a roof over Rick's head, because it looks like he's really struggling in that room you're looking at there if you watch it on YouTube, do your part by hitting the old thumbs up button or subscribing to the pod or leave us a 5-star review. And, of course, the old school way, tell a friend about the podcast. We always appreciate your help. So, Rick, I'm going to circle back to what I just said earlier with the first question there. Let's assume that we're talking last year's draft class or last year's draft before the Bears traded up. They have the first overall pick. And let's assume Olu Fashanu had come out because there was some conversation that he might. Now, the draft haul was enormous that they got to trade down and allow Carolina to trade up. Is there any conversation before you accept that trade about just taking Olu Fashanu first overall to help Justin Fields? Or are you considering all the options?
I'm going to consider all the options. I'm definitely going to try to trade. And we'll get into Fashanu here in a minute. But I would still try to trade out because you can get a ransom. And I thought they did a great job getting as much value as they could, because a team like Carolina came up, needed a franchise quarterback. And when you're in position with the number 1 overall pick, unlike a couple of years ago when Jacksonville had the number 1 overall pick, but there was no quarterbacks that were worthy of that first overall pick. That was a bad quarterback class, and Pickett was the only one that went in the first round. So they were stuck at number 1, and that's when they took Trayvon Walker. So Chicago got the benefit of having a stronger draft class. That's why they were able to make that pick. And whoever ends up at number 1 this year, and if they don't need a quarterback, which is hard to believe because usually if you have the number 1 overall pick, you need a quarterback or else you would be picking number 1 overall.
Right.
But I think whoever ends up with the number 1 overall pick, and let's say, for example, Arizona Cardinals, they'll have a decision to make with Kyler Murray. And if they're going to move on with a new regime, the new coaching staff, that they will definitely stick it to that number 1 overall pick to take either a Caleb Williams or a Drake May.
Fun fact, they also have the Texans number 1 first round pick. So they could be picking first and second, first and 30th. We'll see, but they have 2 first round picks. And
if you were the GM, would you take, just to make sure you hit on a quarterback, let's say you have first and second overall picks, you take Drake May and Caleb Williams?
You know what? Like that, it's crazy. Like people thought Mike Shanahan was crazy for taking Kirk Cousins in the 4th round after they took RG3 3rd overall or whatever. Turns out that wasn't such a crazy idea. Here's the thing. So what if, all right, we're going to quick aside. We'll do this for 2 minutes. Let's say you take Caleb Williams first. You end up with the 2nd overall pick as the Arizona Cardinals by way of that Texans trade last draft. And you take Drake May and then you just trade him. You could conceivably.
No,
I don't know.
Trade him.
No.
But Ryan, do you remember in 2018, the Browns had number 1 and number 4, and that was honestly brought up with 5 quarterbacks in that class. They ended up going Denzel Ward at number 4, and the best quarterback of that bunch, or 1A, 1B, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson going number 32.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's the other thing. What if you miss on both of them? You take Caleb and Drake and you.
I got to make sure I do a good job so I don't get replaced on this podcast.
Oh boy, you had me going there for a second. I was going to buy it. No, that would get you fired on the spot. I feel like you would go do the press conference like you did for the 3 first rounders in 1 year with Cordero Patterson.
Yeah.
You go to the press conference for the first 2 picks and they don't invite you back. They're like, all right, keep walking out the door. Here's your cardboard box. But let me ask you this seriously though. So let's say Caleb Williams goes first. If you're a team at number 2 who equally needs a wide receiver or an offensive lineman, you're taking Olu Fashanu there, right?
I don't know that yet.
Okay. All right. And I should mention Olu Fashanu is the fantastic.
Let's talk about him because I can tell you why I do have a little bit of concern.
Sure. All right. So Olu Fashanu is the wonderful left tackle out of Penn State. He played so well last year, first year as a starter. I think he was 19 and turned 20. What are you laughing at?
A wonderful. That's a new term. I haven't seen it in a scouting report. I have to start using that.
That's a summer term.
Wonderful size and length. He has wonderful left athletic feet for a tackle.
Wonderful disposition.
Oh my God.
He's a gentle giant.
Young man.
Yeah. So he was 19 last year for much of the season, I believe. And he was dominant at times, incredibly athletic, listed at 6'6", 313. And I thought he would have been a top 10 pick had he decided to come out. He returned to Penn State, which is great news for that program. But why don't you tell us your thoughts on Olu Fashanu, who I think is one of the best players in this draft?
Yeah, no, I agree. All the physical traits are there to play left tackle. He's going to be, 20 years old in December?
He's 20 and a half right now.
Would be 21. So in the run game, you see the power to move people. This guy, for as big as he is, plays on his feet in space.
I thought that he needed to finish a little better at times. He's not always a consistent finisher, but the games come so easy to him. I just like to see a little more grit in him go until the whistle blows. Very good athlete and pass pro. He's a really smooth mover. No question about left tackle feet. Plays with body control. He recovers with his feet. He has the arm length. That is his true friend. Did give up a few pressures to the inside on the tapes that I watched. He gave some initial ground when they tried to bull rush him into the quarterback, but he knows how to reset and anchor. This guy can run rushers by the pocket. He played well versus Hall from Auburn last year and Harrison from Ohio State. Got hurt in the Ohio State game. I don't think he returned and played the rest of the season. I know he didn't play in the bowl game, or he was questionable but didn't play. Still has big upside. Is he as polished and where he's going to be 2 or 3 years from now? No. This guy has Pro Bowl written all over him, but he has a ways to go yet to reach that. He has all the tools. I don't know about the mental makeup. That's something we'll probably learn as we go. But when
by the way, just to be clear, you're not saying anything bad. You just don't know the details about how he is off the field.
Yeah, I just want to know how he is off the field. I'm sure he's a great kid off the field. I'm not assuming that.
Right.
But I'm just, what's his demeanor and passion for the game? And, one of the guys that we drafted, who right now I saw on Pro Football Focus is a top 10 left tackle, is Christian Darrisaw. And there was no question about his athleticism. And Christian Darrisaw was like Trent Williams to me.
Mm-hmm.
But there was like, does he finish all the time in space? There were some questions about that, him coming out. But there was no question about his mental makeup and him wanting to be good. And he had some durability concerns. But I think he's going to be one of the premier left tackles in this league before his career is said and done. And I see in the same path with this kid, although this kid may even be more talented because he's bigger.
Yeah, he's the athleticism is what gets your attention at first. You mentioned Derek Hall out of Auburn, the edge rusher, 2nd round pick, and Zach Harrison out of Ohio State, who we saw at his pro day, who, again, we sort of joke, that's the guy that gets off the bus first when you're playing because he looks the part. I think he ended up going in the 3rd round. I thought he was more of a 4th round guy, but either way, 2 formidable opponents that Olu more than held his own against. So that all said, and you were sort of hesitant when I said, would you take Marvin Harrison, this junior, or Olu Fashanu if you needed offensive lineman or a wide receiver equally? What's your concerns with Olu Fashanu in terms of, being a number 2 overall pick?
I guess if you're comparing the two, Marvin Harrison is extremely talented, but he is a proven commodity.
Yeah.
Okay. Fashanu this year, now we may be saying, and he has a dominant year, that's going to get erased. But that's the question actually going into this year. Can he stay on the field for a full season? He hasn't started till this year. I think he had 9 starts his first 2 years. And then he played this year and then got hurt in the Ohio State game and didn't finish the season. So I want to see him go out there and finish the season and play at the level he's capable of playing. And that comes with maturity. And like I said, we already talked about his age. So I think that before it's said and done, you may have that discussion between him and Marvin Harrison. But if you sit here today, I think Marvin Harrison is ahead of him if you had to draft today.
No, I get that. And if you're watching on YouTube, Debo just flashed the graphic for the odds to go 1st overall. And not surprisingly, Caleb Williams is -500. Followed by Drake May. These are all plus money after Caleb Williams. Drake May, Marvin Harrison Jr., Olu Fashanu, Quinn Ewers out of Texas, Kool-Aid McKinstry, the cornerback out of Alabama, and Joe Alt, the offensive lineman, who we'll talk about in a second. I feel safe in saying that Quinn Ewers, Kool-Aid McKinstry have 0% chance of going 1st overall, no matter what year it is.
Yes.
No disrespect to them, but they're just not going 1st overall.
They're not going 1st, and Joe Alt's not going 1st either, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in this podcast coming up.
Yeah, we certainly will. Okay. So let's talk about our comps. This is where things get a little prickly. For Rick gets prickly, I get my feelings hurt. We'll see how this goes. I spent many an hour making sure I had the height and weight as close as possible, and that's where I started. And then I went with the other factors, which may or may not be the best way to do this. You are the comp king, so I will defer to you, Rick. Who is your comp for Olu Fashanu? 6'6", 313.
Yeah, and when I'm doing my comps, as I'm watching, I'm trying to make comparisons. So whatever name pops into my head, I don't have the sophisticated skills to go into the internet and try to do all the
internet
little things that you do to try to come up with comps. But I go off play style and what my impression of him is as a player and who that reminded me of. And he reminded me of Ronnie Stanley when he came out Baltimore. Now he's a Pro Bowl left tackle from Notre Dame. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy, but when he's healthy, he's one of the best in the business.
6th overall pick in 2016, Ronnie Stanley out of Notre Dame. My guy, and by the way, Ron, I looked these numbers up in case I could give you the business, and you nailed this one. I mentioned that Olu Fashanu was 6'6", 313. Ronnie Stanley, during his combine, 6'6", 312.
Really?
You're off by a pound, you jerk.
Man, just think how dangerous I would be with these comps if I actually knew how to look them up on the internet thing.
Well, you're doing great. You don't need to look them up. That's the problem is I have to. So I went with Trent Williams. Trent Williams obviously has a lot more grit than Olu Fashanu does at this point. I think that's one of the things you mentioned there. And part of the reason is because I think Olu Fashanu has huge upside, and Trent Williams is arguably the best left tackle in the NFL. He's 6'5", 315 coming out of school. He was the 4th overall pick in 2010. How angry on the comp scale does Trent Williams get you going for the Fashanu comp?
I really respect that you did all that hard work and effort to put that comp in there, and I could see some of that. But Stanley, there was some questions about his grit coming out of Notre Dame.
Okay, there you go.
So I'm factoring in the realistic football things that I see on tape.
Part of my issue is, by the way, is that you tell me on one podcast you're going to shoot for the moon with these comps, and you compare everyone to Joe Montana, and now you're telling me you're doing down to the minutia of the grit grade to get their comps right. So you're throwing me a curveball here, Rick.
Yep, that's what I want to do. I want to keep you guessing. You don't know where I'm coming.
All right, so the aggregate draft range, our combined draft range, according to Debo, and speaking to us separately because we didn't want to reveal our comps to one another, is top 10. I think he's top 5, Olu Fashanu.
I will put him in the top 5 after I see him this year.
Okay. But right now, top 10 feels pretty comfortable.
For sure.
All right. You mentioned the games. I don't do games to watch anymore because I don't want to hear it from you. So we'll just do your game to watch. And you said Ohio State. And last year you mentioned that's a game he got hurt.
Yep. And that's because Ohio State has some pretty good edge rushers that we'll talk about in future podcasts on our summer school scouting series. And they have a very good defensive line. They got a very good line. They are loaded. Ohio State may have one of the best defenses from a personnel standpoint than anyone in the country next year.
All right. Do you want to take a swing at the number 44, the edge rusher for Ohio State before we go to break?
Oh, I didn't have his name in front of me. Tuatupolo.
That's close. Tui Maloau. Sorry, I couldn't get it either. Tui Maloau. JT Tui Maloau. We'll know his name easily. By September. He's a grown man. But we'll talk about him later in regard to another prospect. Right now, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue to look at these offensive linemen.
You up for playing outside the lines?
What are her directives then?
Neutralize the target.
You do it quiet, and you do it clean.
If your cover is blown, you have to save yourself.
Did you hit the target?
I'm doing everything different this time. She's your field agent. Do what you think's best.
I want to watch that movie so bad, and I couldn't figure out, even though I won Paramount Plus and I have access to it, I couldn't figure out how to put it on my TV because I love the CIA. I love the special ops movies. I watch all of them, and Linus looks like a phenomenal one. And so hopefully I will work on it this weekend to try to figure out how to put Paramount Plus on the TV.
If you're watching on YouTube, you saw the Linus commercial that Debo threw up there on Paramount Plus.
To be clear, a series, not a movie.
A series. Well, he doesn't know. He can't get into Paramount Plus.
I can't get into Paramount Plus. I have access to it. I just don't know how to use it now.
If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Odyssey or wherever, we just saw a commercial on the YouTube show for Linus on Paramount Plus. I recommend that you check it out. And Rick, call me later. I'll show you how to turn the television on and get to Paramount Plus. I mean, Debo, this was the worst idea ever given this man Paramount Plus. I mean, this has been a Something else. All right. Number 1 on our list, Olu Fashanu on the aggregate list. And you can tell me if your individual list is different than that. My number 2 on my list and number 2 on the aggregate list, I'm assuming that this is your guy too. Joe Alt, left tackle out of Notre Dame, 6'8", 317. And I'll be honest, I didn't watch him last year because I didn't need to, but I watched him a few days ago, and I was impressed with him. I liked him a lot. I thought he was way more athletic than I expected him to be, especially at that size at 6'8". Sometimes you feel like you're a lumper. He felt like he was pretty athletic, moved well in space, wasn't a plotter. A lot of good things about the way he played. I thought he played with great leverage for his size. Sometimes he can get a little too upright, but that's not necessarily a surprise. I thought he did pretty well in the Clemson game against Miles Murphy, who was 6'5", it turns out. He's not 6'3", Rick.
Yeah.
265. And we know about Miles Murphy in terms of his strength. He has some things to work on in terms of his technique and pass rush moves, but he'll collapse the pocket on you. And I thought he struggled against Joe Alt in that regard. So I liked him a lot, and I liked him a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah, I agree with you on some of it. I think he's a little tight as an athlete.
So let me ask you this. Why do you say that?
On the run game, he comes off. The question I have is sometimes he waist bends. And waist bends, tells me he's a little stiff through his lower body. And a lot of that can be corrected with coaching and technique stuff. But I did like his aggressiveness. I thought he brought his feet on contact. The waist bend thing is what bothered me. And then I didn't think he was an elite athlete in space. So when you
interesting.
Level, out to linebackers and out in the open field, you can still see some of that stiffness. But because he's so long, it makes him tough to get around because of that length. Very sound and pass pro, very smart, savvy. Looks like a vet out there, the way he sees things coming off the edge. I didn't think he had great recoverability, and I think he may struggle initially with some elite pass rushers when they gain the edge on him at the next level here. He's talented enough to play left tackle, but I wouldn't be surprised if some teams looked at him for the right side as a right offensive tackle too. He's not as pure of an athlete as Fashanu is at left tackle.
No, I agree with that. And 6'8", is that too tall? Is that getting to the line where you mentioned the waist bender?
Right. No, not
okay.
No, because of his length and he's very technique sound, solid player.
So we don't know how long his arms are. He looked like his arms were plenty long watching him play. There were no concerns there. This isn't my comp, but it popped into my head because Trevor Penning, the Saints traded up for out of Northern Iowa a few years ago, took him 16th, I believe. I think Joe Alt's a better player in terms of NFL ready than Trevor Penning, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because Trevor Penning played with an edge. I'm looking at his numbers. He was 6'7", 325, so not that different physically. And you see him here against UNC if you're watching on YouTube. Let's see. Is he a better athlete? And I'm thinking just in terms of size, one plays right tackle, than DeJuan Jones.
Yes, way better.
I think so too. But DeJuan Jones had 400-inch arms, so that made up for a lot of the mistakes, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. So we agree on that. So Joe Alt's a good athlete, not a great athlete. You have some concerns about the waist bending stuff, but that can be fixed by coaching. Is that just a matter of getting better at squatting?
No, just more patience.
I see. I got you. You're not reaching.
No, because he's coming off almost too aggressively sometimes,
okay.
Or as he's losing blocks, instead of staying in balance, he has a tendency to lunge.
All right.
And some of that is some athletic limitations, but not a fatal flaw. And some of it is just technique, which I think can be corrected.
So let's look here quickly. The draft from a few months ago, the first two offensive linemen taken were Paris Johnson Jr. and Darnell Wright. We, on our list here, have Olu Fashanu and Joe Alt. I think those two guys are better than Paris Johnson and Darnell Wright.
Agree.
Okay. And both those guys I love. We love both like Paris, both love Darnell, but just in terms of comparing last year's draft class. All right. Again, Joe Alt is unofficially 6'8", 317. Who is your comp for Mr. Alt?
I went with Eric Fisher when he came out. So I was comparing him I think Eric Fisher, was he Central Michigan?
Yep, you got it.
So a lot of, I thought, similarities, just rolling the Rolodex in my head and trying to remember what I seen back when Eric Fisher came out. So good size, I think, very technique sound, even at Central Michigan. He had a little bit of waist bend lunge, but he got that corrected and became a very good left tackle. The other one that I was trying to go back and forth with was Taylor Lewan at Michigan. So those were kind of my two areas of comps.
And Lewan, I would imagine, based on how he played in the NFL, had a ton of grit coming out of college too.
Yes. Yep.
So Joe Alt, you have no grit concerns?
None.
All right, my comp. Oh, I should mention, by the way, Eric Fisher coming out in the combine, 6'7", 306. So you're an inch off and 11 pounds.
All right, my fault.
Yeah. My comp, I don't even hate this one. And by the way, Eric Fisher was the first overall pick in 2013. That was that draft. The 2013 draft was a funny one in the first round. It was sort of, as you mentioned, like the Trevon Walker draft. It wasn't clear who was going to be the first overall pick. It was hard to trade out, so on and so forth. My comp for Joe Alt, Mike McGlinchey.
Yeah, well, that's a very good attempt at trying to come up with a comp because
that's basically what it was.
When you use your pewter and try to do all the thing.
I did.
It may become. The difference is when McGlinchey came out, he did not have left tackle athleticism. He was a right tackle only, in my opinion. Some similar plays of style, but Joe Alt is a better left tackle athlete than McGlinchey was coming out.
Thank you. I appreciate that constructive criticism instead of just throwing a pie in my face. By the way, 6'7", 309, so not that much different than Eric Fisher and 8 pounds lighter than Joe Alt. Interestingly enough, McGlinchey was the 9th overall pick in 2018 as a right tackle only. He's been pretty good.
I remember we had him come in on a top 30 visit.
Yeah.
He walked through the door, and you almost had to grease him to get through the door. He was so big when he came in. That was a man now. That was one of the biggest players that I've ever seen in person come walking through my through the door in my office. So
both agree top 10 range for Joe Alt?
Yes.
Yeah. Again, so I'm checking real quick. Paris went 6 overall when the Cardinals traded up for him, Paris Johnson Jr., and then Darnell Wright went 10th to the Bears. So that seems reasonable that these two players will make their way into the top 10. And again, a team you're going to be watching a lot of, it looks like, is Ohio State, because you want to see Joe Alt against those edge rushers, Ohio State.
Linemen that are going to play against Ohio State that we're grading next year, watch the Ohio State kids because they're pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go down to our next. And I think we'll see if this is number 3 on your list. He's number 3 on my list. JC Latham, right tackle, Alabama.
I'm right there with you on this one.
All right, look at that. We're making things happen here, Debo. Latham is unofficially 6'6", 326. Let me see what I said about old JC here, because I liked him a lot too. Again, Derek Hall, we talked about him earlier in the Auburn game, gave him a little trouble. But again, he was the 37th overall pick, Derek Hall was, and it's not surprising that you might have trouble with a strong and twitchy edge rusher. But I thought he was an overall prospect on the rise. He's going to get better. He hasn't played a ton, so I have to take that into consideration. So like with Olu Fashanu, he is thick, and he's not soft. He feels like he's well built. He feels like I thought he moved well in space. I liked a lot of the things he did. Shows good balance when going up against stronger defensive ends. Solid in pass pro, has good base, handles twists and stunts as well as anyone I watched. And I thought that was interesting. And you can tell me, Rick, when you're good at twists and stunts, does that mean you're a smart player? You have your head up, or is that just coaching? What is that?
It's smarts. It's awareness. It's, we talked about mental quickness at quarterback. Well, offensive line, you have to have mental quickness as well, because when that snap, you have to be able to read and react to what you're seeing happening in front of you. And I thought this kid did that exceptionally well.
Okay, we agree. All right, what'd you think about him?
Same side. I think this kid is a right tackle athlete only. I don't think he's a left tackle athlete. Love his size, and I've seen him in person. I was down there this spring, and he is a big man. I'm surprised at that weight estimate, because I think he's north of that.
Okay.
Looking at him in person, but we'll see.
On the field, he looked pretty big too.
Yeah, he is a big man. This guy is powerful. He creates movement at the point in the run game. I think he needs to be a little bit more consistent versus the more athletic defenders that he goes against. A couple of times you see guys get across his face, especially when he's trying to block on the backside of runs. He needs to really get his hands on the defenders early, because if there's too much space, you can see him also lunge, which is correctable with coaching. But compared to Alt, when we were talking about guys that are lunging, Alt was a little quicker to recover than him, although they both need to clean that up. This guy was very good in pass pro. I thought he was one of the better pass pro guys that I seen on the right side. He can anchor versus power, very patient to pass rush moves. He's excellent when they come on counters to the inside, trying to use his feet to recover and his length instead of just waist bending. But when he's set deep, there's a short set in pass protection where you get your hands on the rusher right away after the snap of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
When he sets deep, where he takes 2 or 3 kick steps back, that's where he was susceptible to the pass rushers going to his inside.
Hey, let me ask you about that, Rick, because that's a good point. If you've watched football just as a casual fan, or if you're like me trying to figure things out, it feels like the deep set is difficult for a lot of offensive tackles because you're going up against athletic edge rushers. So who's an example of a good offensive tackle who is on point with his deep set?
Boy, I'd have to go through that. Like the thing that you have to remember is when you deep set, a lot of it depends on your angle. And some coaches and offensive line coaches I've been around, when they deep set, it's almost not like 45 degrees outside. It's almost like your kick stepping straight back.
Right.
That way, and you have to stay square. And if you stay square, kick stepping straight back, that gives you the ability to react to the counter inside.
Gotcha.
That's where most of them are susceptible. If they go to the outside, they are, because of their size and their length, they can just push the rushers by the quarterback. But where they're susceptible, if they come out and kick step too wide to the outside, that leaves a huge gap between them and their guard. They lose that, as you call, a bumper inside.
Yep.
You kick step straight back and stay square. That gives you a better chance of being able to react to the inside counters, where some of these guys that we are talking about are susceptible to that right now. And a lot of then that can be just cleaning up the kick step and your angle when you're kick stepping back on a deep set.
And that is why the importance of being a pretty good athlete. Like if you're a big fat slob out there, you don't have a chance when you're going up against these athletic defensive ends.
Yeah. And it's the same thing too in the run game with this guy. It's the lunging stuff, which is comfortable. But this guy, he will definitely be a top 15 pick. And I think he is a better athlete at right tackle than when we saw Wright from Tennessee, Darnell Wright.
Yep. That's what I had, top 15 pick. So I'm going down the list here. So the most recent draft, I mentioned Paris Johnson Jr. went 6th, Darnell Wright went 10th, and then Peter Skoronski went 11th. So let's just go down the list. Fashanu, Alt, and Latham. Would you take those 3 over Johnson Jr., Wright, and Skoronski?
Yes.
Because Skoronski's actually playing guard now. So we've had our first guard drafted, even though I loved him at left tackle, but no one cares what I think. All right, let's keep going here. Who is your comp for JC Latham? He's 6'6", 326.
I said Orlando Brown. That was my comp because I think he's bigger than 326, especially when I seen him in person. He is a big man.
Yeah, I thought I had you on that one because Orlando Brown at the Combine in 2018, he was the 3rd-round pick, by the way. He was 345, 6'7", 345.
Right.
He looks to be more 345 than 326. I'll give you that. I went with I'm laughing because before the show, I went back and got all the heights and weights for these guys so I could give you the business. Lane Johnson. I like Lane Johnson for the athleticism and the grit. I can see your face there. I won't look up as I read the rest of this. He's 6'6", 325 right now, which is right on the number for JC Latham. He was 307 coming out of Oklahoma, which I didn't know until the very last minute. So I was going to change it. I'm going with Lane Johnson right now, size and weight. But we don't have to talk about that. He was the 4th overall pick in 2013.
All right. Hey, kind of like you're taking shots, and you've been pretty good. And then all of a sudden you throw in a zinger there.
You know what? It's like I'm playing Steph Curry one-on-one and you're just draining half-court shots, and I take the ball out of bounds and just shoot it immediately. And it, 14 bounces, it gets to the other end of the goal and goes out of the bound. Whatever.
Hey,
all right, games to watch.
As much as I respect that, how hard you work on the internet to try to find the comps.
I know.
This one was a little bit hard for me, although I respect the work you put into it.
There you go. Was that so hard?
This one kind of rocked my world a little bit.
This one was out there. I'll give you that. I do not dispute anything you say, especially You should have seen my reaction as I was sitting here by myself when I realized that Lane Johnson weighed 307. Coming out of Oklahoma, didn't weigh 325 like he does now, according to.
I respected you would still come on the show and stick to your guns.
I know. I took my medicine. That's how, half the battle showing up. I like your games to watch, Rick, because I think this is probably right on point. Alabama practice. That's all you need to see.
I go and watch against Dallas Turner.
Yeah, Dallas Turner, number 15, is we'll talk about him, no doubt, next week. And I don't want to say he was in Will Anderson's shadow, but we talked a little about Will Anderson because he was draft eligible. Dallas Turner, he will be the next in line to be the next great Alabama edge rusher. And JC Latham will more than have his hands full at practice with him and with Coach Saban giving him the business, no doubt, because Coach Saban isn't one to – he's like you. He doesn't take it easy on people.
I take it very easy on people when they bring up a Lane Johnson.
Lane Johnson. Well, I joke with – I text you. I'll tell you the comp when we talk about the Georgia tackle in a second. I'll tell you the comp today. I gave him Debo over text, so I didn't want to see his face. All right. We taking a break, Debo? Is that what we want to do?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back and hit the final two offensive tackles offensive players we like, and we'll talk about that right after this.
In case you're new here, we're here to make history. We are more than the names on our back. We're the team on the front, the country on our shoulders, the city behind us, and the fire inside us. The best in the world. We got us. We don't just play the world's game. We run it.
That's right, Rick. If you have Paramount Plus, you can watch NWSL, the Women's Professional League in the U.S. Soccer League.
Playing in the World League or in the World Cup right now, so I've been very tuned into the World Cup. In the USA, they came back and battled to tie the Netherlands last night. Almost had a chance to win it at the end.
Very good Dutch team indeed.
Yes.
Yeah, I watched the Vietnam first round game where they won 3-0. And I'll be honest, and I think this is a testament to how far soccer's come in this country. I was incredibly frustrated with how inconsistent the women played. I thought they should have beat Vietnam 8-0. And I thought the Netherlands is a good team, but
that was a physical game. Now, if you watch,
those girls don't mess around. Like they play tough, and I give them credit for. And this is one of the things I like about women's soccer. They don't flop around like the men do.
No, and then I can't remember, the two went after each other pretty good last night when there was a over aggressive tackle.
Love it. So anyway, the Dutch and the U.S. will probably get through their group if you're interested, and they have one more game each. The Dutch have to play Vietnam, and the U.S. has to play Portugal, I believe, and then it's on to the knockout round. So go USA. All right, here we go. Number 4 on the list. Again, let's see if we're in agreement on this. He was number 4 for me. The Houston left tackle Patrick Paul. Was he number 4 on your list?
No, he was 5. Borderline 5'6".
Okay. All right. Let's talk about that then, because I know our buddy Pete Prisco.
His recognition, because if he's listened to this podcast, well, he's driving to do the Florida swing with me for the training camp, that Pete did bring up this guy, although I liked Pete's tight end that we talked about on the earlier podcast.
Conyers, at Arizona State. This one I had a little bit more struggles with. All right, good. That's good. We should talk about it. All right, Patrick Paul, he's unofficially listed at 6'7", 308. And I'll just a little spoiler here so we can get some more perspective on him. I had him as a mid-first round pick, and I was basically part of that was based off the guys that were drafted last year. Like, I think he is further along than Broderick Jones and Anton Harrison. Not necessarily a better athlete, but in terms of being ready to start. And that's why I had him going top 32, if you will. What else? Let's see what I had here. High-waisted, so long-legged, long-armed. And I don't know if the high waist is a thing when you look at his body type. What are you laughing at?
Go ahead. Finish your point. This is a meeting where you'd call timeout, and then we'd have a discussion. But go ahead. About what? The high-waisted part? About the height, weight, about the better athlete. Okay. Let's start there. So I didn't say he was a better athlete. I said Broderick and Anton Harrison were better athletes. I think he's more ready to start. Okay. Do you agree with that or not? Absolutely no. Well, let me ask you about the high waist and just the body type. Like, is that a concern as an offensive tackle, not being able to bend, as you mentioned earlier, about one of the other players? Or if he can bend, it doesn't matter how high his waist is? Yeah, no, he's a little high cut. I'll give you that. Okay. but I didn't have any issues with the athleticism.
All right. I thought he moved well laterally. I thought he did well against inside stunts. He showed a good anchor at times versus Tyree Wilson in pass pro. Now, look, Tyree got after him a few times, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Tyree Wilson is a great player, incredibly raw. He will get better, but he's strong and long and physical. I thought he had room to get stronger, but flashed strong hands and showed that he could sustain blocks in the perimeter. Had a good anchor at times, but he had a high center of gravity, and that meant he needed a little more room to re-anchor versus the bull rush. And you talked about that earlier with other players in terms of not being able to reset until you're in the quarterback's lap. So that's a concern. Need to do a better job sustaining blocks versus the run, I thought. And sometimes when he comes off the line of scrimmage with his head down, he can get beat inside with an early swim move. I saw on a couple of occasions. So again, I had him as a first round pick based on the fact that I thought he was more NFL ready. Not a better athlete than Broderick Jones and Anton Harrison, 2 first-round picks last year. Rick, you vehemently disagree.
So let me just clarify this because this is going to play into our comps. You're saying he's not a good athlete.
I'm saying he's athletic, but he's not a high-end athlete.
Okay.
I don't think he's a plotter, for example.
Just remember that statement.
Go ahead.
All right. This guy, to me, was a very good athlete.
Okay.
So he does need to add bulk and strength. This guy plays with energy and grit. He tries to really finish, especially in the run game, but he just doesn't know. He plays with too high a pad level. He has to how to play with lower pad level. But his hands are all over the place technically in the run game, also in the passing game. For as athletic as he is, he's almost a little too spastic. If that makes sense. That means that he wants to go out there and try to bury people all the time. So I love the grit and toughness, but you have to do it in a controlled manner. And he's just like a bull in a china shop. I've been described that a few times in my life.
Yep.
Just goes instead of being a little bit more patient. You can still be aggressive and show the grit and finish, but just be a little bit more under control because you have the athletic skill set to be more under control.
Can I ask you a question? So you think he is a high-end athlete? Is that right?
He is a very good athlete, yes.
Is he a better athlete than Broderick Jones or Anton Harrison in your mind?
I think he is very similar.
Okay.
Notch above.
All right, great. No, that's good to know. All right, go ahead.
So, and then the other thing you mentioned, he just needs to get stronger, and he's all over technically in the pass pro. His hands go. He doesn't know where he's shooting his hands. Everything from A to Z. You're taking an athletic left tackle, and he's maybe a mold of clay.
Yeah.
Just a big blob of clay, and you're going to have an opportunity to really define and hone in his skills because of the unique traits that he does have.
So you could have go ahead.
Time.
Right. I was going to say you could have an offensive line coach that falls in love with him for those reasons, right?
Yeah. And then he says, let me get my hands on him. I'll get him fixed. And
could you also have an offensive line coach that says, I don't want to deal with doing all that work?
Well, then he shouldn't be your offensive line coach. That's what they get paid to do.
Okay. No, I that's good to know because sometimes guys want whatever they want. They may not want to spend extra time molding that clay that you're talking about there. All right. So it sounds like that you like him. Why do you have him going on day 2?
The reason I said on day 2 is because I don't think he's going to come in his first year as a rookie and be a day 1 starter. I don't think he's going to be a starter. You're going to have to rush him in order to be starter his rookie year. I think it's going to take a year to develop him. I think he'll eventually be a really good left tackle in the league, but I don't think he's ready to step there and do that. Now, he'll probably end up going in the first round. I could see why you would put him there, but the other 3 offensive tackles we just talked about are less of a projection.
Right.
It is.
No, I agree. Do you remember Josh Jones, the tackle out of Houston from 2020? Ended up going in the 3rd round. I thought he was pretty athletic. He ended up going 72nd pick overall 3rd round to the Arizona Cardinals.
Yep.
How would you compare those two? Not necessarily athletically, but in terms of being ready to play coming out of Houston.
I think this kid may be a little more ready to play. The reason I think this kid plays with more grit and toughness.
Okay.
I like that this guy showed on tape when you're watching him that he has passion for the game.
Yeah.
To play the game of football. I'm not saying Jones doesn't, but this kid really impressed me with his demeanor on the field.
And I think an important part of that is when you watch that Texas Tech game, it wasn't like he was a wallflower going against Tyree Wilson. It seemed like he took that personally and was trying to impose his will on Tyree Wilson at times. And that's something you can take away.
That's when you're trying to do all these psychological tests and trying to figure out competitiveness and grit and all that stuff. Well, you can identify that on tape, and this kid shows that on tape.
Yeah.
Just doesn't know what he's doing yet.
So, I mean, you mentioned that he's not going to be ready day one. Is Broderick Jones ready day one?
No. Oh,
okay.
I think he's more ready day one than this kid because Jones is a lot thicker than this kid as well.
And also, to your point about JC Latham, practice probably has a lot to do with Broderick Jones' development at Georgia, going up against all those insane first-round picks. Okay, who is your comp for Patrick Paul, 6'7", 308 unofficially?
DJ Humphries when he came out of Florida, who was another tall, athletic kid that was not ready to start his first year. And I think he eventually, I can't remember what year he ended up starting, or maybe he was forced into starting his rookie year. I can't remember his play history, but he reminded me a lot of DJ Humphries when he came out.
You're going to love my comp. Let me tell you something. 2015, DJ Humphries was the 24th overall pick. And again, you have to be cheating, whether it's with your pewter or you going down to the public library and looking it up in the paper copy. Patrick Paul, Houston left tackle, 6'7", 308. DJ Humphries, 6'7", 305 at the combine.
I amazed myself. It's my recall is incredibly impressive.
Hey, Debo, let me ask you something. How can Rain Man Spielman do this, but he can't turn on his television to get Paramount Plus?
I think someone's lying to us.
I swear my mother's still alive, so I'll just...
Oh, gee, come on, Rick.
that I just do it off what I'm seeing on tape, and that's who that kid reminded me of.
You're pretty good at that. All right, I have to. Why do I have to? I don't even want to do comps anymore, Debo. Like I hate doing this. Like it's like a burden. Let me preface my comp by saying this is what I hope Patrick Paul becomes as the finished product, because DeBrickashaw Ferguson was very technically sound. I didn't watch him in 2006. I would imagine that was one of the reasons he was drafted so highly, because he was a technician. Does that sound right, Rick?
And he was a very good athlete. And so you are saying that this guy is not a great athlete, but yet you're going to put the Brickashaw Ferguson.
I didn't say he wasn't a great athlete. I said he wasn't as good an athlete as Broderick Jones and Anton Harrison, but I thought he was athletic.
Ferguson was a really good athlete coming out.
Look, man, I struggle with comps. Okay, can we agree on that? The Brickashaw, who was a great, as you mentioned, coming out of UVA, 6'6", 312 was his weight. So again, Rick beat me on that, even though I had the ability to actually look at the numbers. 4th overall pick in 2006. Games to watch, and you put for Patrick Paul because of the competition, no doubt, the Big 12 opponents.
Yeah, this is the first year they're playing in the Big 12, so that's going to be a step up. So I'm anxious to see how he responds to a higher level of competition.
All right, I'm going to ask you this before we move on quickly. Is there a better chance that he picks 20 to 40, or do you think later than that? Because I think he's going to go early.
No, he'll go in the first round before second. He'll go in the first round. I kind of put my grade on what I seen. I should have projected it to the lower first probably, but what I seen on tape, if I had to draft him today, I would have said second, third round.
Okay. Nope. Fair enough. All right. Let's go to our next player. Played left tackle last year. Actually played some center early in his career at Duke. That's right. We've talked about 2 Duke players here. Riley Leonard, the quarterback, and now we're talking about left tackle for the moment. Graham Barton, listed at 6'4", 311. And here's the first thing I'll say. And I don't know if this means anything or not, but when I turned on the tape and I looked at him, I was like, he doesn't look like JC Latham, for example, or Joe Alt, for example. He looks like an interior offensive lineman who is being tasked with playing outside because of need and athleticism, and he's probably good and all that other stuff I get. But I wasn't necessarily sold on him just on the eyeball test. So let me ask you about that. Do you have to guard against that? Is that something you note when you haven't seen anything, but you see him walking to the field, go, okay, this guy doesn't look like he has the body type?
No, you have to see him in person. So I actually kind of like this kid's body type a little bit. But
let me ask you this: where do you think he plays at the next level?
Guard.
That's right. Okay. Fair enough. And let me just see quickly. I said more technician than I wrote this down. More technician than a bull in a china shop, to borrow your phrase there. Moves well in space. Every time I watched him outside, it felt like he was an interior offensive lineman in his movements, his ability to get to the second level, his ability to combo block. Wasn't particularly stout at the point of attack. I thought he struggled to re-anchor versus power edge rushers. And again, all things that indicate that maybe he moves inside. But I liked him for his athleticism. I liked him for his movement in space. And I think he has a chance to be a good interior offensive lineman and perhaps get drafted, top 100 or something.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. That's great evaluation.
What do you have? I can tell you loved it. Go ahead.
I did. I thought this guy had enough height, but I'm not sure how long his arms are. So that's where my struggle was at left tackle.
Yep.
But I think he's a good enough athlete to move inside to guard, which may be his best position. He has the movement skills to fit into an outside zone scheme. I think my biggest issue is I think this guy is a good athlete, but he is also plays out of control. There's too many times out of all the guys that I watched, it wasn't because of his athleticism. He was on the ground. I think I charted 6 or 7 times as I went through the tapes that he was on the ground. And it just needs to get more under control. But I love the aggressiveness in the kid. I think he was a really good space athlete. Some of the things that you see him out, on screens, you can see that he has the athletic movement to do that. He just, in pass pro, he's over aggressive as well. Instead of being patient to pass rush moves.
Hey, Rick, let me ask you, is that a function of perhaps being not as strong as the people he's going up against and he's trying to set the tone, or why does that happen?
Why are you trying to poke negatives into this kid? So a guy that's coming off the snap trying to win against the man in front of him and comes off aggressively, it has nothing to do with him trying to hide anything. He just wants to beat the man in front of him. So
yeah, but I mean,
it's kind of like our comps. I really want to not only beat you, but bury you when we do these comps.
Well, your mission accomplished. And by the way, just Debo has some polls later in the show. I'm hoping against hope that I pull this out, but I got a feeling it's going to be a landslide, which I'm not happy about it. Anyway, go ahead.
Back to this guy. I do think that he's going to be a better interior guy than outerior guy. He's not Skoronski. When you watch him, Skoronski played on his feet a lot better. But I do think this guy is a day 2 prospect and that he'll move inside because he has the traits. And I liked watching him because I thought he played with some grit and toughness. And I usually give the guys kudos, and I kind of fall in love with the guys that love to play the game.
Yeah, I had late day 2, early day 3. As an interior offensive lineman, who was your comp for Graham Barton, unofficially 6'4", 311?
I went with the guy we drafted from Boise, Ezra Cleveland, who had played left tackle at Boise, and he had short arms. He played with grit and toughness. We ended up moving him inside at guard, which took some time for him to adjust to. But I thought I saw a lot of traits in him as I saw in Ezra.
58th overall pick in 2020, second round, Ezra Cleveland. Unbelievable. He was, again, Graham Barton was 6'4", 311. Ezra at the combine, 6'6", 311. So you're off by 2 inches. You nail the weight. I went even further inside because Graham Barton played center early in his career at Duke, and I did Josh Myers. Look at that face, Debo. He's a terrible poker face. Second round pick in 2021, the year after Ezra Cleveland. But he's 6'5", 310. So I beat you.
Great.
I beat you on the.
That's the winner now. You got to go work at the carnival and guess weight. You'd make $1 million.
I already got the top hat and the cane. I'm all set. I'm halfway there. All right. So the game you're interested in is Clemson. And that's no surprise. They have a bunch of dudes on that defense that are going to get drafted. We'll be talking about them in the upcoming weeks. Any other reason you want to see him play Clemson?
No, yeah. Well, Clemson's going to have some interior defensive linemen. They have 2 good linebackers. So they always have, out of the ACC, they seem to always have the best athletes on the defensive side of the ball. Although I don't know if they're playing Florida State or not. But to be honest with you, the one reason I went back and watched this kid, because I wanted to see your Duke quarterback you talked about.
Yeah, what'd you think?
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about that off the air a little bit.
You know what's funny? I was texting with a scout buddy of mine, and we were talking about the quarterbacks, and the Riley Leonard comp for him was the Riley Leonard comp was Ryan Finley. So it wasn't quite as high on him as I was. We'll see. I
agree with that scout, whoever it was, whoever your source is.
It could be my dog, and you agree with my dog instead of whatever I said. All right. So just to be clear, Graham Barton was your. There's Rick using the computer. If you're watching on YouTube, looking good, Rick. Looking good.
Well, how do I get Paramount Plus on this thing?
Yeah. Was Graham Barton your number 5 ranked offensive lineman out of all the guys you watch?
He was 6.
Okay. Was Connor Beebe 5?
BB was 4.
Oh, okay. Well, give me your list. So Olu, Joe Alt, JC Latham, and then what?
Then BB.
Yep.
Then Paul, and then our Duke boy.
Okay. Graham Barton came in 6 for you. Cooper Beebe, I actually liked. I didn't rewatch him. I watched him back in the fall when I thought he was coming out. I had him as a mid-second round pick. And then I texted you yesterday. I don't know if you had a chance to watch him yet. Amarius Mims, the Georgia right tackle. The only game he started was the Ohio State playoff game because Warren McClendon was the starter, and he took most of the snaps. He had an MCL in that game, and he's interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm not smart enough to look at just a couple of snaps. I need to get a full picture, but I've heard on the streets that this guy has a chance to be.
I heard on the streets. So I had him as a possible day 1 guy, and I think if you add him to the mix, and when you watch him, we'll circle back, of course, and compare it to this year's first round of offensive linemen, which is a good group. I think he could be an interesting guy. Again, another guy who's incredibly raw, hasn't played a ton, 6'7", 330 unofficial, but he had a day against Zach Harrison. He had a day against Tuimoloau. Gosh, I had to say that name a million times. Number 44, who's going to be a first-round pick, most likely. We'll talk about him next week, no doubt. So those are some other names to watch. The top 5 guys we mentioned aren't the top 5 guys no matter what, just guys that we wanted to see and talk about, so don't take it personally if we didn't hit on your guy here. All right, here are the polls, Rick. Better comp for Penn State offensive lineman Olu Fashanu. Ronnie Stanley gets 55% of the vote. So Trent Williams gets 45%. So
that's pretty close.
Another L for Wilson. If this were a political race, that's a butt whooping. 10%. All right, another L for Wilson, another W for Spielman. Please tell me that's it, Debo. Are there more polls?
That's it for today. We'll do 1 per position.
Thank you. Golly. What's the overall tally? 4-1, 3-1?
What one did I lose to?
The quarterbacks, right? The first one.
Yeah, it's the first one. Might have been, I don't know. We had the same comps for Caleb and Drake.
Yeah, so we ended up going with Quinn Ewers, I think, the comp there, and Ryan won that one.
Yeah, well, let's re-pull that.
Yeah, we'll redo that one. Fake ballots. All right. That's it, Rick. We'll be back next week. Are you on the road next week to the training camps or the week after?
Yeah.
Do you know who that is, Rick?
No.
Oh,
that's the doctor. That's the Bob Newhart.
You got it. That's right. If you're watching, if you're listening to us, Debo just threw up a gif of old Bob Newhart asking, "Is that an internet?" Which is a question we get often from Rick. Are you on the road next week, Rick, for training camp?
I will leave Sunday. We're going to Jacksonville Monday and Tuesday. Tampa Bay Tuesday night. Thursday, Tampa Bay, then driving to Miami on Friday. So we'll have a full Florida swing next week. And the following week, I will be up in Detroit covering the Detroit Lions combined practices with the New York Giants.
Let me ask you.
Barkley will be there.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask you about Saquon, but we'll save that. When you did these joint practices, how concerned were you about fights? Because fights always happen.
The coaches are in charge, usually every combined practice I was with, you talk to your team before. And in fact, Denver, when Vic Fangio brought Denver Broncos, they actually came into our facility and both coaches had an opportunity to address both teams.
Oh, nice. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So it's okay. Not here to fight. We're here to get better.
Right.
And it's competition. So every once in a while when, the dog days of summer, as they say, you'll get heated a little bit, but for the most part, guys understand that they're working and just trying to get better. That's what you're trying to accomplish in those combined practices.
Yeah, no, I get it. I would just ask one favor when you guys are in Jacksonville, try to keep Pete from acting around Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson the way he did when he saw Roger Goodell at the combine, knocking over people, giving them hugs.
I'm worried about Tony Baselli because
Tony Baselli, that's right. I forgot about Tony.
He actually ran through me, knocked me over because I didn't see him coming from my blind side. Just to go stand next and talk to Tony Baselli on the sideline. Then was at his Hall of Fame induction. I've never seen a man crush like Pete has on Tony Baselli.
Roger Goodell's a close second, but you're right. Tony Baselli is number one in Pete's heart. All right, so we'll get updates next week when we talk from the road. Thank you all for joining us. That was episode 57.
No,
remember
57. Count
what did
them.
I say? 57?
Yeah.
You know what's funny? Like I'm literally looking at the number and I said 57. I'm so discombobulated with this butt whooping I'm taking in these comp polls.
Well, go on that internet thing. Maybe try to use some recall of your own instead of cheating on the internet.
I can't. I mean, you're like the Rain Man with these heights and weights. It's insane. All right, that's it. That's it for me, Ryan Wilson. Thank you for Debo for producing. Thanks for Bob Newhart for guessing all the heights and weights so accurately. We'll talk to you guys next week.